They smiled for the cameras, posed for the publicity stills, and sold us the dream of romance under the studio lights. But behind the makeup and the glamorous gowns were marriages that looked nothing like the glossy pages. Tonight, we peel back that lacquered surface. 12 Golden Age stars whose private lives tell a very different story of control, humiliation, violence, and the studio machine that helped bury the truth. These are stories of power reversed, of fame used as armor and as weapon. Some of these accounts are explosive, some are slow-burning campaigns of ruin. All of them raise the same question. How did Hollywood's brightest women get to live in public adoration while men in their private lives paid with dignity, health, and sometimes lives? This is not a celebration. It's an excavation. Read on and decide for yourself how much of the legend was true and how much was invented to hide the rot. 1. Joan Crawford, the queen who ruled like a general. Joan Crawford's face sold millions of movie tickets. Her public self was discipline wrapped in glamour. But those closest to her painted a darker portrait. Not just a temper, but systematic cruelty. Staff and friends later described a household where arguments turned violent, objects became weapons, and psychological humiliation was routine. One widely repeated incident tells of Crawford hurling a heavy hairbrush that split open her husband Philip Terry's temple. He required stitches. The studio line, he fell. That neat explanation speaks to a larger pattern. Studios preferred neat explanations to messy truths. Crawford's abuses weren't only physical. According to accounts, she engaged in long, ritualized denunciations, hours of listing failures, humiliating him in private and terrorizing him into silence. Alcohol intensified those episodes. When he finally left in 1946, friends said it wasn't only her temper that trapped him. Crossing her could mean crossing the studio system itself. For many men, the danger wasn't only bruises, it was loss of career, reputation, livelihood. 2. Tula Bankhead, the wit that cut too deep. Tula Bankhead was famous for a voice and wit that could stop a room. But wit, when turned inward, becomes a weapon. Bankhead's cruelty, as described by those near her marriage to John Emery, specialized in public humiliation. At parties, she reportedly disemboweled his dignity with razor-sharp put-downs, cutting into his masculinity, mocking his intelligence, and turning social gatherings into theaters of shame. This was psychological warfare performed for an audience. There's a cruelty in using punchlines to wound the person who shares your life, and witnesses later described Emery as diminished, afraid to speak, and systematically stripped of dignity. When the marriage ended in 1941, court documents cited mental cruelty. Bankhead's own flippant quips about marriage only underscored how normalized her behavior seemed to be for her. She entertained, and the rest of Hollywood laughed along. 3. Zsa Zsa Gabor, glamour with a dangerous temper. Zsa Zsa Gabor's life read like a parade of diamonds, husbands, and headlines. But behind the jewelry was a history of alleged physical outbursts, hairbrushes, slaps, and objects hurled in rage. Multiple reports, and in some cases police reports, describe violent incidents with several of her husbands, including injuries that required stitches. The studio system and the tabloid industry often sanitize these moments, framing Gabor's temper as exotic charm. Yet, the cumulative pattern, repeated reports, witnesses, and legal filings points to something more serious than temperamental eccentricity. Her famous quips about men being kept take on a darker meaning when paired with accounts of violence and control. For Bette Davis, the theatrical cruelty offstage, Bette Davis cultivated a public image of intensity that translated into fearless performances. But for husbands like Arthur Farnsworth, that intensity became relentless personal denigration. Reports describe long, sustained sessions where Davis would mimic, mock, and systematically erode her partner's confidence. Emotional target practice, a studio executive allegedly observed. Davis's method was surgical: identify an insecurity, exploit it, repeat until the target breaks. The marriage ended amid tragedy and rumor. Farnsworth's death in 1943, a skull fracture after a fall, is surrounded by whispers but not proven blame. The pattern that emerges from multiple accounts, though, is clear: a woman who used performance-level precision to wound those closest to her. 5. Barbara Stanwyck, icy control in a gilded cage. Barbara Stanwyck's screen persona projected strength and composure. Off-camera, friends and colleagues later described a different brand of dominance. Unlike the explosive abusers who threw objects, Stanwyck's control was bureaucratic and institutional. She reportedly exerted influence over her husband Robert Taylor's career, selecting scripts, vetoing choices, and directing his public image. At home, she allegedly ran the household with military precision, demanding reports and permission for everyday choices. Her most effective weapon, according to those who observed the marriage, was emotional withdrawal. Cold silence could stretch from days to weeks, a holding pattern of reward and punishment that eroded autonomy slowly and thoroughly. Where some abusers lash out, Stanwyck appears to have perfected the opposite: governance by deprivation. 6. Gloria Swanson, mood tsunamis and strategic cruelty. Gloria Swanson's life had more acts than most careers: marriages, remakes, reinventions. But the accounts from ex-husbands, especially Michael Farmer, describe a pattern of strategic emotional sabotage, manufactured crises launched at the worst possible moment, deliberate sleep deprivation, micromanagement, and weaponized financial dependency. Swanson's talents for image-making extended to relationships. She could present composure in public, while strategically destabilizing a partner's professional life in private, subtly manipulating opinion and credit until the husband's career stalled and his confidence failed. To some observers, Swanson's marriages read like long productions in which she demanded the starring role at any cost. 7. Mae West, the queen who erased a husband. Mae West's public persona was playful dominance. In private, dominance reportedly took a chilling turn. Early in her life, she allegedly denied a marriage to Frank Wallace, then paid for his silence, an arrangement that some have characterized as transactional and humiliating. Later companions describe a pattern in which West expected 24/7 availability while retaining the right to dismiss and ignore. West's power ran on social currency, money introductions, and gatekeeping. Where independence surfaced in a partner, her reportedly punishing response was social invisibility, public or private shunning engineered to humiliate. In a town where connections meant survival, that kind of exile could ruin both heart and career. 8. Clara Bow, the tormented it girl. Clara Bow, the original it girl, battled demons born of trauma. Her childhood, a catalog of abuse and poverty, left scars that later surfaced in violence and volatility. Witnesses to her marriage to Rex Bell describe episodes where alcohol and trauma combined in frightening ways: punches, broken objects, and unpredictable outbursts that left those around her shaken. Bow's story is tragic on multiple levels: a woman shaped by early trauma, who later became both victim and perpetrator of harm. In her case, mental health and the absence of proper treatment are central to understanding the pattern. That distinction doesn't excuse harm, but it crucially shifts the frame from malice to woundedness that flares. 9. Ava Gardner, the beautiful storm. Ava Gardner and Frank Sinatra's marriage reads like a cautionary tale about passion and volatility. Plenty of headlines focus on Sinatra's tough guy image, but by many accounts Gardner's rage could be physical and terrifying. Witnesses reported flying objects, bruises, and at least one hairbrush incident that required stitches. The coupling of two volatile personalities, both with powerful egos and heavy drinking, created a volatile chemistry. Sinatra, despite his public persona and connections, is described by friends as genuinely afraid at times, afraid not of mobsters, but of the woman he loved. Their split in 1957 left wounds on both sides, and a lingering image of love turned destructive. 10. Susan Hayward, fireworks that became routine. Susan Hayward won acclaim for playing women on the edge, and life with her first husband, Jess Barker, reportedly mirrored that intensity. Accounts from their marriage describe temper flare-ups that cross lines, prolonged verbal assaults, objects thrown, and incidents that culminated in police being called, a rare and serious step at the time. As Hayward's star rose and Barker's career stalled, resentment allegedly transformed into cruelty. The picture that emerges is not of one moment, but a pattern. Identity erosion through constant attack, culminating in a divorce that read like excavation of years of fear and humiliation. 11. Lupe Velez, the Mexican Spitfire whose passion turned violent. Lupe Velez was marketed as a firecracker on screen, and in private jealousy reportedly fueled episodes of dangerous aggression. Accounts of her marriage to Johnny Weissmuller include scenes of public violence, slaps, scratches, even a reported chase with a knife at a dinner party that required intervention. Velez's volatility was the kind that made public gatherings tense and staff watchful. Her story is complicated by the era's racialized marketing, Latin passion Spitfire, which often romanticized and excused behavior that in other contexts would be condemned as abusive. Velez's life ended tragically young. The violence and instability she brought into relationships must be understood alongside the pressures and stigmas she faced as a woman of color in Hollywood. 12. Miriam Hopkins, the quiet strategist of ruin. Miriam Hopkins' reportedly methodical cruelty reads like a counterpoint to the explosive abusers on this list. Her tactics, friends said, were clinical: freeze a partner out, change locks, manipulate schedules, and subtly sabotage a husband's career through whispered doubts to producers. Hopkins' approach left fewer bruises, but arguably produced longer-term damage, missed opportunities, reputational erosion, and financial consequences. There's something chilling about a campaign that leaves no fingerprints. Hopkins' alleged methods, gaslighting, information control, and career interference, relied on power, influence, and patience. In that sense, her cruelty was a product of industry leverage as much as personal malice.